Dr. Viernal adjusted his sterilized gloves, his frilled crest twitching with anxiety. The Zwairarke were a species that value precision, caution, and above all, a healthy respect for injury. And yet, the moment the first human mercenary walked into his med bay, he knew something was terribly wrong with them. Sergeant Duncan Hayes strolled in, holding his arm, blood dripping onto the floor in thick, steady drops. His uniform's sleeve was sliced open, exposing a jagged wound so deep that bone peeked through the torn muscle. Viernal's secondary eyelids flicked rapidly in alarm. "You require immediate medical attention. This is severe trauma." "Nah, it's just a scratch." Duncan grinned, as if he weren't actively leaking. Viernal stared. "Your skeletal structure is visible." "Yeah, but it's not a bad break." Duncan shrugged, wincing only slightly. "Just slap some of that Regan gel on it, and I'll be fine." "Slap some?" Viernal barely stopped himself from screaming. "You need proper bone stabilization, disinfecting, your nerve endings are exposed, how are you not writhing?" Duncan tilted his head as if the question were strange. "It's not that bad. Had worse back on Foros Prime. Lost 2 toes to frostbite." He waggled his booted foot. "Still got 3 good ones on that one." Viernal's frills flattened. He processed the information in horrified silence, then turned to grab his medical scanner. His hands trembled slightly. He had studied battlefield injuries extensively. He had treated warriors from over 12 different species. None of them spoke about amputations so casually. The skin results only increased his distress. Duncan had microfractures along the ulna, shredded muscle tissue, and enough blood loss to cause dizziness in most species. Viernal prepared a sedative immediately, turning back, only to find Duncan poking at the exposed wound with a mildly curious expression. "Do not touch it!" Viernal nearly dropped the injector. "Are you actively trying to worsen your condition?" Duncan chuckled. "Relax, document. I've had worse." The Zwairarke medic inhaled deeply through his respiratory slits. "That phrase is not reassuring." Duncan simply sat down on the medical cot like a man ordering a casual drink. Viernal numbed the area before using the regenerator to properly seal the wound. Duncan, for his part, barely flinched. No muscle tension, no spasms, just quiet amusement at Viernal's clear distress. Within minutes, the treatment was done. The human rolled his arm experimentally, then flexed his fingers. "See? All good." He hopped off the cot and gave the medic a thumbs up. "Appreciate it, document. I'll try not to bleed out on your floor next time." Viernal opened his mouth, then closed it, at an utter loss for words. Duncan left with a casual wave, still smiling, as if he hadn't just been put back together. Viernal slowly sat down, his mind spiraling into a series of frantic questions. What kind of species ignores pain? How could someone smile through open wounds? He opened his medical logs and typed his first report. Observation: human pain tolerance is severely abnormal. Subject displayed a disturbingly casual attitude toward deep lacerations and blood loss. Will continue monitoring. He would soon regret that decision. Viernal barely had time to recover before the next human limped into his med bay, covered in soot and what looked like plasma burns. Corporal Jenkins, another mercenary, grinned despite his injuries. The Zwairarke medic's frills stiffened in alarm. Half of the soldier's uniform was scorched away, exposing blistered skin and fresh shrapnel wounds across his torso. Viernal reached for his emergency kit. "You are in critical condition. It's just a scratch." Jenkins waved him off. Viernal twitched. "You have sustained severe plasma burns, embedded metallic fragments, and possible internal hemorrhaging." Jenkins tilted his head. "Huh. Yeah, that tracks. Then why?" Viernal's voice trembled. "Are you standing?" Jenkins shrugged. "Didn't think it was that bad. Can you just patch me up real quick? Commander needs me back out there." Viernal stared. He scanned the human, and his disbelief deepened. Jenkins had 2 fractured ribs and a metal shard near his kidney, yet he spoke as if he had a minor bruise. He pressed a hand to his temple. You require immediate surgical extraction. Jenkins sighed. Doc, I appreciate it, but if you can just slap some of that miracle glue on me, I can. Virnal didn't let him finish. He jammed a sedative into the human's neck. Jenkins blinked in surprise before collapsing onto the cot. For the next hour, Virnal carefully removed the shrapnel, disinfected the burns, and sealed the worst wounds with dermal Regan gel. The fact that a conscious Jenkins had tried to argue about walking it off still left him shaken. By the time the human woke, Virnal was sitting nearby, frills pressed flat. Jenkins stretched, flexing his side experimentally. Huh. Feels better already. Because I performed actual medical treatment. Virnal exhaled slowly. Had you refused, your injuries would have worsened exponentially. Jenkins chuckled. Yeah, but I wasn't dying. You had a metal fragment near your internal organs. Still had the other one. Virnal took a long, slow breath, trying to suppress the rising existential dread. He looked at the data he had gathered so far. Humans disregard pain at an alarming rate. Common phrases include "it's just a scratch" and "I've had worse." Unsure if this is delusion, a biological quirk, or madness. As Jenkins left, whistling, Virnal wondered how many more humans would force him to question reality. The battle outside had barely ended when Duncan Hayes returned, but this time, he wasn't just bleeding, he was missing an entire arm. Virnal's frills shot up in sheer, unfiltered panic. Duncan strode into the medbay like nothing was wrong, his severed limb tucked under his remaining arm. Hey, document think I might need a bit of help. Virnal let out a strangled noise. You have lost a limb. Duncan glanced at his shoulder, where the bleeding had already slowed to a disturbingly steady trickle. Yeah, figured that out when my rifle flew out of my hands. Bit inconvenient, huh? The ZYRK medic was already moving, activating emergency stabilization protocols. You should be in shock. How are you even standing? Duncan smirked. Been through worse. Virnal's eye twitched violently. Worse? You have detached from your own body. Duncan held up the severed arm. Technically, it's still attached to me. Just not in the right way. The medic's hands trembled as he worked, sealing the wound with coagulant gel and preparing for regeneration therapy. His mind reeled. Duncan was still making jokes while his arm was gone. Virnal wanted to scream. Why did you not come immediately? Had to finish the fight first. The ZYRK nearly collapsed. His hands were moving on instinct, but his sanity was disintegrating. Your species should not function. This should not be possible. Duncan chuckled. Come on, document. You act like this is the worst thing that's happened to me. Virnal's vision darkened at the edges. His body locked up. His mind simply refused to process another second of this. Then, without another word, he collapsed. By the time he woke up, Duncan was already sitting upright, cheerfully discussing prosthetic options with another human. Virnal stared at them, his soul hollowed out. His hands shook as he recorded his latest log entry. There is no logical explanation. Humans disregard bodily integrity at a level that defies medical understanding. If this continues, I may not survive them. Virnal was done. Completely, utterly, and irreversibly done. After weeks of treating humans who casually dismissed their own grievous injuries, he had reached his breaking point. The final straw came when Duncan walked in again, this time with a jagged, self-inflicted wound across his own thigh. Virnal's frills barely twitched. He just stared. Duncan grinned sheepishly. Okay, before you say anything, this one was on purpose. The ZYRK medic's voice was dangerously calm. You mutilated yourself? On purpose. Didn't have a choice, Duncan admitted. Got caught under some wreckage. Had to cut myself free. Virnal exhaled sharply. And of course, let me guess, it's just a scratch? Duncan chuckled. Well, yeah. But it's a deep scratch. Something in Virnal finally snapped. No. No, it is not. That is not how biology works. Duncan blinked. Doc, you okay? Virnal stood, trembling with fury. I have seen you lose blood, bone, and limbs. I have listened to you dismiss every agonizing injury as if your own body were a minor inconvenience. His voice rose to a near screech. I have heard you say it's just a scratch to wounds that would kill other species. Duncan rubbed his neck awkwardly. Look, humans just heal fast. I do not care, Virnal shrieked. You are a nightmare. Duncan held up his hands. Doc, breathe. Virnal's hands balled into fists. You breathe, you reckless, indestructible lunatic. For the first time, Duncan actually looked at him, registering the deep exhaustion in the medic's gaze. The human's smirk faded. A beat of silence. Then a sigh. Yeah. Okay. Maybe we go too far sometimes. Virnal collapsed into a chair. You think? Duncan hesitated, then sat beside him. Look, document. I get it. We're a pain in the ass. But it's just how we survive. Virnal covered his face. You survive by actively terrifying your doctors. Duncan chuckled. Well, yeah? The ZYRK medic groaned into his hands. I am requesting a transfer. Duncan patted his shoulder. Don't be like that. You're the best doc we've ever had. Virnal muttered something in Zerkian that was most definitely a curse. Duncan only grinned. See? You're getting used to us.